We are going through what political scientists would refer to as a realignment in politics, in the media, in America. Democrats in Washington failed at running this country in every measurable way, and the media failed to cover that failure honestly and objectively. They never thought Donald Trump was going to be president again, so they didn't give it much thought. And because of that, they are failing to the point where they barely exist anymore. But we are also failing. The conservative media has gotten so comfortable reacting to how the legacy media reacts to Donald Trump that we have forgotten how to cover the news ourselves in many ways. And this cycle is nothing new. It's been in place for the last 50 plus years. I don't even think we realize we are doing it, and it's not unique to us. This is what happens. A news story breaks, Donald Trump says something, the legacy media reacts, and then the conservative media reacts to the legacy media's reaction, and round we go. And it continues on and on. Days turn into months, months turn into years, years turn into decades. But that ends today on this show. Will we still point out people like Margaret Brennan when they embarrass themselves on Sunday mornings? Maybe. I'm not sure yet. I went through it yesterday chronologically. Maybe, we'll see, case by case. But two very important things have shifted. The first, we now have a force of nature in the White House that happens to be a Republican. Not only that, but Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, meaning the legacy media should start reacting to us or just go extinct. The second, we are no longer what we were years ago. The media landscape has changed. This is not 2020 anymore. We aren't struggling for a seat at the table. We are now at the head of the table. Independent media, for the first time in history, has a larger audience than the legacy media, meaning it's time for them to start reacting to us. And I've been trying to think of a way to describe what it's been like over the last week since Donald Trump took over last Monday. And it finally crystallized in my little head this afternoon. America has a president. For the first time in 4 years, America has a real commander-in-chief. Not some guy with Alzheimer's who was forced on all of us 4 years ago, but a man that the rest of the world respects, if for no other reason, because he has a pulse, because he's a man of action, which is a seismic shift from the way things were, not just under Joe Biden, but the way things have been for the last 5 decades. You might remember that Sesame Street song from years ago, which one does not look like the others? And they'd have, 3 things up there and one of them would be different. I mention that because 8 days ago, when you saw all the former presidents sitting next to each other on stage, Joe Biden next to Bill Clinton, next to George Bush, next to Barack Obama, no Michelle. Where was Michelle? Another story. We'll get to that later. They all look the same to me. They all feel the same. They all did essentially the same thing when they were in the White House. Not much. The only person on that stage that doesn't quite look like the others, and I don't mean this physically, the only one that doesn't belong with that group is Donald Trump. Because everything about Donald Trump is different. And that change was on display once again in the White House briefing room today. Caroline Leavitt, the youngest press secretary in history, 27 years old, held her first briefing today, and she made it clear that the old ways are over.
We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room.
Independent media are now in the briefing room for the first time in American history. The front row is no longer filled with the same old 3-letter legacy networks. They've been pushed out forever, not by the White House, but by you, the American people. And after taking questions from the independent media first, Leavitt went to the legacy media, who are not only predictable, but they are still evidently struggling with why we would ever arrest criminals. Another example of the realignment that I'm talking about. Things have gotten so bad that the White House press corps are now asking the White House press secretary why criminals are being arrested, to the point where the White House press secretary thought it was important to describe in detail many of the crimes that just a handful of the 4,000 illegal aliens that have been arrested so far have been charged with.
On January 23rd, ICE New York arrested a Turkish national for entry without inspection who is a known or suspected terrorist. ICE San Francisco arrested a citizen of Mexico unlawfully present in the United States who has been convicted of continuous sexual abuse of a child. ICE St. Paul has arrested a citizen of Honduras who was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor. ICE Boston arrested a citizen of the Dominican Republic who has a criminal conviction for second-degree murder. This criminal was convicted of murder for beating his pregnant wife to death.
It also might not surprise you to learn that the woman who asked Donald Trump Caroline Leavitt, why the administration is arresting criminal illegal aliens, asked her a question after Caroline Leavitt described their crimes. So she just did that and laid out all of the crimes that some of these people have committed, and she still asked this question. And I'm wondering if you've ever had a question in your mind that you've been ready to ask somebody, and then somebody asks the question you were going to ask, right? Then you have to think of another question. What sane person would ask the same question? Well, that's what you just saw. Caroline Leavitt described in detail what these criminals have done while they've been here in the U.S., raping, murdering, stealing, and that woman still asked why they are being arrested. And this is going to continue for the next 4 years. And wouldn't you know it, after answering why criminals are being arrested, the new White House press secretary was asked the very same question again, this time by someone else sitting in the front row who works for one of those three-letter networks. I'm telling you, these people are out of their minds. These are not well people. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues at a pace that we've never seen before. In the last 24 hours, the president has reinstated military members who were forced out over the COVID-19 vaccine. He eliminated DEI in the military formally, mandated a process to develop an American Iron Dome that can defend Americans against drone attacks, and committed to eliminating income taxes. Doesn't that seem like something maybe you'd ask about, eliminating income taxes? But Democrats in Congress want to focus on eggs. Typically, I would say egghead. I'm not going to do that. I'm better than that. I'm smarter than that. I can come up with something better than that. It hasn't come to me yet. But little Lizzie Warren, Massachusetts senator, and her colleagues sent a really strong-worded letter to Donald Trump demanding to know why grocery prices, specifically eggs, have not come down, writing, quote, "We write to ask about your administration's plan to lower food prices for American families. You have tools you can use to lower grocery costs and crack down on corporate profiteering, and we write to ask if you will commit to using these tools to make good on your promises to the American people." What a letter, Liz. What a letter. Brilliant stuff right there. She taught at Harvard. It shows in that letter. That was smart. I guess I'm just sort of wondering why Lizzie Warren didn't send that exact same letter to Joe Biden every day over the last 4 years, because grocery prices are high, and they are still high because of Joe Biden. That's not conjecture. That's not a lie. It's not ballyhoo. That's a fact. I swear, if these people were smart, they'd run the world. Thankfully, they are not. They are not. And I'm wondering why grocery prices are the top of Democrats' list of things to do right now and criticize Donald Trump for, to the point where back in the briefing room, someone there asked Caroline Leavitt about eggs, again in the White House briefing room.
There is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024, when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office, or upstairs in the residence sleeping, I'm not so sure, egg prices increased 65% in this country. We also have seen the cost of everything, not just eggs. Bacon, groceries, gasoline have increased because of the inflationary policies of the last administration.
Okay, so once again, political scientists would call what we're seeing right now a realignment. Politics, the media, America. And in the White House briefing room, there's been a major realignment, because over the last 4 years, the briefing room hasn't been used for briefing the American public. It's been a room of lies, of hate, of gaslighting, and propaganda.
Many of us have personal stories of that day, 9/11 of 2021, and more than 2,000 lives were lost. It's an ongoing process because, again, it is an ongoing process. There is a process here. The Department of Justice is independent. We respect that process. I don't want to get ahead of that, so we're going to let it play out. I'm not going to get into a hypothetical on this. Look, I can't get into hypotheticals about the numbers and what they were going to be or going to be. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals from here. I'm not getting into hypotheticals from here. I'm just telling you what I can tell you.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.